Poland has declared a state of emergency because of all of the illegal migrants coming into the country from Belarus. Actually, numbers are coming out that they now, just last month, have had 8 times the amount of illegal migrants coming into the country from Belarus than they had all of last year, all of 2020. So this is quickly turning into a disaster for Poland and thereby also potentially for the rest of the EU. Now, before we get into the news, I have a video that I want to show you that represents well what's going on right now on the border. The video itself is actually from the exact same situation that's happening and been happening for the last month, couple of weeks at the very least, in Lithuania, where the border guards are detaining all of these migrants now coming into Lithuania as well. As you might know, Belarus is bordering up to both Lithuania and Poland, so they are both having similar issues, right, with all of these migrants. So I want to show you this video. Now, what you're seeing here is the Lithuanian border forces trying to detain these illegal migrants coming in from Belarus. But what's interesting here is that in the background, you can see all of these Belarusian riot police and border forces actually standing there with riot shields, and you can imagine how they have been forcing these migrants to cross the border and make sure that they don't return to Belarus. But at the same time, obviously, you have the Lithuanian border guard and the Polish border guard trying to prevent them from coming into their countries as well. So Poland has declared this state of emergency because of these record migrants, and they're having such a hard time detaining them. So now they're actually putting up this barbed wire fence all along the border with Belarus, just like Lithuania did a couple of weeks ago. So obviously, Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus, the president in Belarus, is being accused of using these migrants as a political tool to lift some of these sanctions that the EU has put on his country for human rights violations. The BBC does a really good job at highlighting what's going on right now from just 1 hour ago. So take a look at this. The Polish parliament has backed a state of emergency on the Belarus border amid a surge in migration and upcoming Russian-led military exercises. So from the Polish point of view, this isn't just about all of these illegal migrants coming into your country from Belarus, right? It's also about this story about how Belarus is working with the Russian military to host in their country, right next to Poland, to host a military exercise of literally 100,000 troops, right? So if you're Poland, given the complicated history of that whole area with Russia, you're a little scared of this, right? So it's not just about the migrants, but that's what we're gonna take a look at first here. The tough law bans large gatherings and limits movement for 30 days in areas along Poland's border with Belarus. Poland accuses Belarus of inducing migrants to fly there on the false premise of legal entry into the EU. Belarus is not an EU member, but borders 3 countries which are, Poland, Lithuania and Latvia. Polish MPs voted to approve the law on Monday, though many opposition politicians said the emergency measures were disproportionate, as close to 200 towns in a 3-kilometer strip along the border are now off limits. By barring journalists from the area, they accused the government of trying to cover up a practice of pushing people seeking asylum back into Belarus. So you can kind of see both sides of the argument here. If you're the Polish government, you want this handled quickly, efficiently, and effectively to make sure that these illegal migrants stop just pouring into your country, right? But at the same time, if you're a citizen living in Poland and your government declares a state of emergency, you're already a little nervous of things going on the border. And now if you can't send journalists to monitor the whole situation, then I understand why people could get a little scared and why people would protest that decision. At the very least, journalists should be allowed to enter that zone, right? But the problem is that journalists don't really have special rights compared to normal citizens, and then the law wouldn't really make sense anyways. Either way, this is a temporary decision that will last 30 days. So it's not like it's a permanent thing. But I certainly can see both sides of the argument. Now, take a look at this. The EU has accused Belarus's authoritarian President Alexander Lukashenko of engineering the migrant influx as a form of retaliation against sanctions that the EU put on Belarus. The Belarusian government has denied the allegations and blamed Western politicians for the situation on the border. And I think that's a bit silly to try. I understand why if you're the Belarusian government, I understand why you have to make that argument. But I think it's a bit silly to try to claim that it's the Western politicians that essentially are forcing your country to push out all of these migrants into Lithuania and Poland, which just happen to be the EU, right? It's a bit crazy. So the EU imposed these sanctions on Belarus in the 24th of June. They decided to do this year. And right after these sanctions are put on Belarus, this giant migrant flow began happening, right? So you can choose to believe that's a coincidence, or you can choose to believe that it's the Belarusian government doing this on purpose. That they're saying that you guys put these sanctions on us, now we're going to use the migrants that we've taken in from primarily Iraq, Afghanistan, and so on, the Middle East in general. We fly them into our country. Now we're going to push them, actively push them, as you saw with the riot forces, push them into Poland and Lithuania. The EU put these sanctions on Belarus because they say as a response to the escalation of serious human rights violations in Belarus and the violent repression of civil society, democratic opposition, and journalists, as well as this incident with the Ryanair airplane that was forced down in Belarus some time ago, a matter of weeks ago, right? So the EU imposed all of these sanctions on Belarus, and they obviously, it looks like they are using these migrants as just a political tool to hope that the EU would lift these sanctions, so they would get rid of some of these devastating economical sanctions. The Belarusian government is trying to say that since we have these economic sanctions on us, we can't contain all of these migrants anymore. But I think it's, because it costs a lot of money and so on, which in a way you could make that point, but I think it's a bit silly when you see the date of these sanctions and then right after all of these migrants are taken out from the detention centers on the border in Belarus and being pushed out into these other EU countries. It's not really happening to Ukraine, like it could also happen to Ukraine, but that's not really the case. It's happening to the EU countries. So I'm not sure there's a lot of doubt in terms of that. Poland is also worried about this thing, which is just as important, this buildup of Russian forces in Belarus. And Russia is claiming that they are doing this to prepare for a big military exercise, right? Check this out. On top of migration, he cited the president of Poland, the Prime Minister of Poland, cited that concerns about large joint Russian and Belarusian military exercises that are due to start near the Polish border from Friday, right? So they are starting these joint military exercises in this week on the close to the Polish border, close to the Lithuanian border as well, by the way. The Zapad 2021 drills will be held at training grounds in Russia and Belarus and will be based on a scenario in which those countries come under attack. Russia's TASS news agency said the drills will involve about 200,000 people and more than 80 planes and helicopters. Russia and Belarus have insisted that the drills are defensive in nature. Imagine if you're Poland, you're beginning to be a little nervous if you see 200,000, most of them Russian forces, come into Belarus and they park their vehicles and helicopters right on your border, and you're not supposed to be worried. Given the history with Russia, this is just a coincidence. This is not a provocation. So Poland, the Baltic states, and Ukraine are skeptical of their. I like the language. They're skeptical of their intentions, Addressing MPs, Mr. I'm not gonna try to pronounce his name, but the Prime Minister said an attack might be probable, warning that this was not only a diplomatic conflict. So we have the Prime Minister of Poland saying that an attack might be probable. This isn't just like some politician of a small party within the country. This is the Prime Minister saying that an attack from a Russian Belarusian joint military exercise might be probable. Now, let me just be clear. I think there's about 0% chance that Russia and Belarus would be crazy enough to try to attack one of these EU countries when it's this obvious. I think there's about 0% chance that this is actually going to happen. But if you're someone from Poland, from Latvia, from Lithuania, and you're seeing 100,000 people, most of them military, Russian people, coming in to Belarus near your country, near your border, that's going to ring some alarm bells. And if it didn't, it would be kind of crazy, right? This is going to create tensions with all of those countries for however long the military of Russia intends to stay in Belarus. And it might not be that Russia has any intention outside of maybe being a little provocative. It might not be that Russia actually is going to do anything bad here. But just imagine having that big of a force right next to your border. That's going to create a military response within your own country, within Poland, Lithuania, and so on, that they are going to bring their military forces close to the border. Now, at the same time, you have these border forces trying to stop all of these migrants coming in, right? And just a few kilometers away, they are going to be witnessing a massive military drill. You can imagine a situation where someone does something stupid, where someone feels too provoked and they try to protect their border, or someone does something. And that's the worst case scenario, where this wasn't an intended conflict, but something breaks out because people are a little undisciplined, or they feel threatened, they overreact. These things happen, you know. This also might be why so many politicians in the EU are becoming more in favor of the EU becoming militarized. I just did a video on this, a 14 minute video, which I really think you should watch if you haven't, because it's crazy how Europe is selling arms to Saudi Arabia and different countries, especially when they're attacking Yemen. And it's crazy how the EU is slowly but surely becoming militarized, and almost no one knows about it. So go check that out in my channel. It's the newest explainer video I did. It should be right there on the top, so it would be easy for you to find. Just a couple of clicks away. But before you do, I just want to say that there's a good portion of politicians within the EU that believe that the EU should become militarized, that the EU should have its own army. And situations like these, where NATO might not be able to do a lot, situations like these could be a good reason why. Now, I'm not in favor of the EU becoming militarized. I think it should remain what it is. I don't think it should keep growing as it is and begin to try to create military research programs and have its own army and so on. But this would be a good reason why, when countries within the EU feel threatened, and sometimes you wonder if the individual armies are going to be enough of a deterrence from these superpowers like Russia and so on, to threaten single countries within the EU. That would be one of the good arguments why. But in terms of these migrants, they are stuck now on the border between Poland and Belarus, and they have no shelter, and neither of the two countries are willing to take them in. So you got to feel for all of these migrants that came from the Middle East, trying to make their way. But at the same time, you also understand these countries, that they don't want to take in any more illegal migrants. I think a lot of countries are in favor of taking in legal migrants, but there's a clear difference from when your border is being invaded by thousands of people and you haven't allowed it. Then obviously there's a clear difference. But I don't see it changing, because the EU won't budge. The EU is not going to lift these sanctions. Belarus is keep sending all of these migrants over the border, trying to get to Lithuania and Poland as well. So I don't see anything changing. I don't know where this leads. I would like for you guys to comment with your thoughts on this issue, because I don't know where this is going. I don't see anyone budging. The EU is not going to stop these sanctions as long as the Lukashenko government keep doing what they do to journalists, and especially with these migrants. If the Lukashenko government think that pouring in migrants into the EU and just keep doing it until the EU budge, if he thinks that's a good way to make the EU bend to your will, I think he's wrong. I think he's wrong, but I might be wrong. Tell me what you think in the comment section. I'd really love to hear your opinion, because I don't see where this is going. Like, I don't see this ending in a good way. And these migrants are being kept as a political tool. And obviously that's a tragedy in its own. Thank you for watching, guys. This was my take on it. Please let me know in the comment section what you think. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And as promised, I'm going to put the names of my supporters on Patreon in this video as well, with a link to Patreon where you can support me as well and have your name appear at the end of my videos. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Give me a like if you liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one.